Steve, good morning. How's it going?
Hey, going good, man. How about you?
It's going good. I'm excited to catch up. I know we stay in touch, but it's always fun to really dive into some topics here, which we're going to be doing here today. Before we get into it, you've been on the podcast here a handful of times now, but go ahead and introduce yourself for anyone that hasn't caught one of those episodes.
Oh, my name's Steve Hanson. We live in South Central Iowa and kind of are involved in everything whitetails in Iowa here, from real estate and land management. So.
Yeah, for decades of experience. I always get excited when I get to talk to people that have literally decades of experience because there's so many things that you have seen and learned over the years and mistakes you've made and can flatten the learning curve for other people. So I'm excited to flatten the learning curve here a little bit, hopefully today. But when you moved to Iowa and became that full-time resident, obviously Illinois, you grew up in Illinois, and
Right.
then do you think Illinois and Iowa were closer then than what they are today in terms of quality of whitetail?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was part of, me coming over this way and moving to Iowa because, I saw the quality in Illinois really start to drop off 20 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to remember, I was hunting fairly close to Chicago. So that was, being developed at a rapid pace, even way back then. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. And I saw, Illinois, really go downhill. I've still, a couple of the farms we hunted there, I've never even in Iowa seen farms that had that kind of genetics as we did kind of in that, western suburbs of Illinois. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, yesterday I just recorded with Jimmy Martin is his name. He bought the Sam Iupa buck, the LaSalle County, Illinois.
oh yeah,
I found that conversation fascinating. So you're kind of the same area you're talking about genetics wise. It's the number 3 all-time typical, number 1 Illinois typical, and it was shot in 1991. So it's actually the world record whitetail from 91, 92 until 93 when Mel Johnson shot his record buck. Because no one knew it was in the basement. So it was technically the world record, but it was never scored until, this year.
Yep. That's the one that was up at the Deer Classic.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
That was the deer there. So to your point, the genetics, it's that area is definitely there, but I thought that was really interesting. And so diving into Iowa, obviously it's crazy because I feel like there's always been a lot of attention, but it's continuing to compound and more people in my opinion, based off of just the point creep, more and more people are wanting to go and hunt Iowa because of what it is. What does the draw process look like for someone that is looking to do it for the first time? And do you encourage it? Because if an archery tag is going to take a while, and I just want to get your opinion.
Yeah, I would say everybody that, anybody that's a follower of yours or listens to these podcasts that's into big deer absolutely should be putting in for Iowa preference points. The process to do that starts here pretty soon. You can start putting in on the 4th of May. And then I think the process goes till like the 2nd of June or somewhere real close to that. So you get about a month, basically the majority of the month of May. The draw opening always starts on a Saturday and ends on a Sunday. And try to do it early because it sometimes their systems get overwhelmed. But, you can get a preference point. It doesn't assign you any unit that you have to hunt or anything else. You can just get that point, and if you sit on it for 5 years and then decide to use it on a bow hunt or a muzzleloader hunt, it's valid for any zone, any state. But that being said, and it's going to cost you about $60. I think it was $60.50 this year.
Yep.
And then, but that being said, for archery in the 2024 season, and my knowledge is primarily based on zone 5, but the other high quality zones, zone 4 to our west and zone 6 to our east, they're all going to be fairly similar. You drew last year, Jake, with 5 points.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people that didn't. So we're expecting it to be less than 50% chances with 5 points and 100% with 6 points this year. So, and another thing that leads a lot of confusion is, your 6th year of applying, you would have 5 points. And a lot of people, this gets screwed up with people every year where they say, I've got 6 points. And when we go back through the math or whatever we have to do, we eventually figure out, no, you have 5 points. So when you draw your if you drew a tag in zone, if you were guaranteed to draw a tag in zone 5 this year with 6 points, that would actually be your 7th year of application.
That's
Which
crazy.
I know that's not what you want to hear. The fact that you have no points.
Yeah, right.
So,
I'm back to 0 right now. Yeah,
yes.
that's really interesting because I even remember talking to people, around that draw time, like, oh yeah, 5 points, you're good to go. And then after the draw came out, I got my tag and I was talking to some other people, and even you're like, there's a lot of people that didn't draw with 5 points,
Right.
and it was assumed it was a shoe in, like, yeah, you're good with 5 points, which this goes to show. Uh,
Yep.
yeah. Do you think I will end up being like a 10-point state for zone 5? Like in
Yeah.
10 years?
A lot of the time I would have said no, but the fact that we're basically at 7 years now makes me think that maybe so. That's I'd have a hard time believing it'll get to that, but I also, when I started hunting and guiding and whatnot here in Iowa, our customers came every year.
Yeah.
They would draw every single year. So I've seen the whole progression from, taking no points all the way to taking this many now. So
Yeah. Well, at the Iowa Deer Classic, we were chatting, and you were telling me what governor's tags used to go for, and then and then we'll talk about what the governor tag at the Iowa Sportsman's Banquet went for. So, what was governor's tags 20 years ago, and what are they at now too? Because that's a good illustration of how popular it is as well.
I don't know the very low end of the spectrum because I probably wasn't paying attention to it. But I know I bought one ironically, at the Iowa Deer Classic. I bought a Iowa Governor's Tag in 2007, um, and it was $2,500. I bought it for an out of state client. So and to see where they're going today is kind of crazy. That outpaced the land market. So
Yeah, drastically. What was it? How much did it go? Was it 42,000, 37? I can't.
45.
45,000. Yeah.
Yeah,
So 20.
45,000 at the Iowa
Yeah.
Sportsman's Club event there that you and I were at. So
Yes. That is just that's when you hear that, that's crazy. And is there any other whitetail location that could garner a tag like
I
that?
don't think so.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and what's unique about an Iowa governor's tag is it is not a governor's tag like a lot of Western states. Just as a comparison, if you were to draw or you were to purchase an Arizona governor's elk tag, you could hunt 365 days a year. You could hunt in closed seasons. You don't have to pick a zone or unit. Basically, if the area is open to hunting, you can hunt there for a whole year. So you're not even constrained by regular seasons. Whereas an Iowa tag, these people that purchase the $45,000 Iowa tag, they're going to have to pick one season, whether it be archery, gun. So they basically are getting one of the opportunities that I, as a resident, get 3 of a year. So that's what's really unique about it. In comparative to back to Arizona, their residents won't even draw elk. A resident may go 10 to 20 years without drawing an elk tag there. So those tags have pull more weight than a governor's tag here. But it is a very unique part of the Iowa culture here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if I had to guess what some people's opinions are, like when they hear that, they're like, man, it's a shame what whitetail hunting has turned into. But, assuming that, like, because that's a hard thing for people to understand, someone willing to write a check for $45,000 to go hunt a whitetail.
Sure.
But at the same point, this goes to show how well Iowa has done in comparison to the rest of the country of preserving or doing their best job to keep Iowa what it is, which is, arguably the best whitetail state.
Yeah. No,
It's like if they didn't have all these restrictions, and if it wasn't that special, then it wouldn't garner that. Illinois governor's tag, I don't think they sell any of them because you just go over the counter and buy
right.
one.
No, that is a good point. It does show that they've set the bar pretty high here, and people certainly appreciate it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about, I think this is a common misconception. Obviously, what about party hunting? Because I know there's different thoughts on that, and I know we're getting into some slightly like hotter debated topics. But explain what party hunting means, and is that a way that someone could hunt Iowa more often?
Yeah, the party hunting thing, I mean, for all practical purposes, is a loophole, so to speak. It is, it's unique to a few Midwestern states. I think Minnesota also allows it. What it basically is if Iowa has about 6,500 non-resident tags that they allocate that can, that are either sex tags. So most people would consider those buck tags. That's what you would get when you went through the draw process successfully. If you don't draw or don't have a tag, you can put back in July for a county specific doe only tag, an antlerless tag. They cost 200 and something bucks. But if you purchase a tag for only the gun season, it's only regular gun 1 and 2, not muzzleloader and not archery, that tag, you are eligible to party hunt. So if you're going to party hunt, what has to happen, the reason this exists is because historically the hunting in Iowa was deer drives. Everybody just got together in big groups, local farmers, and they, did man drives, pushed all the deer out to people. And one group shot, one group was the driver and one group were the shooters. Well, the party hunting things exist because once the standers got their deer, they would effectively be done. So they kept this loophole open so that those people could continue in the hunt and in the process and continue filling tags. So now that has morphed itself into if, like if I have a good friend that is a non-resident and he didn't have a tag, he wanted to purchase a county specific. That's an important part of this. You have to pick the county that you're hunting in. Doe tag, I could sit with him and he could fill one of my buck tags. That's 100% legal. The only exception to that is it cannot be a landowner tag. It has to be a statewide, my purchase statewide tag. It cannot be my landowner tag. So basically I would give up, in my situation as a landowner, I would be giving up one of my 3 tags to host a friend. And the rules are, I'm not going to say super specific. The person who's the host has to be physically present on the hunt. They have to be in the field is the definition. And, that there's been a lot of cases and a lot of people, arrested or fined or whatever, because they, got their grandmother's tag, put it in their pocket, and they're hunting, she's in a nursing home in Des Moines and they're hunting down in Southern Iowa, and that's 100% illegal. So the host person has to be present on the hunt, which makes it a little more challenging, but it is legal. The party hunting thing is 100% legal as long as it's done correctly. The weird thing about it is you're going back against, Iowa. We just talked about having 6 years to draw a tag. Not only is party hunting legal, technically there's no limit. So if one of my landowners, let's just say out-of-state friend / landowner, wanted to come in town and he sat with me one night in in the hut and shot a buck, he could sit with another friend of ours the next night, shoot another buck, another friend of ours the next night, shoot another buck. I mean, that's what's so unique. I have local friends party hunting as deer drives. They're resident, old school hunters. They might kill 5 or 6 bucks a year in one weekend. So it's strange that we have such a loose system on one side and such a rigid system on the other. So,
yeah, that is interesting. So what if, so you have your friend come in and they're hunting on your tag and they kill the world record whitetail, but it's your tag that's going on it. Who is it? The actual hunter that would be entering it in the record books, or is it?
It's interesting. This is an interesting fact, and we have had to deal with this. It is ineligible.
Really?
Yep. It is ineligible, at least by Boone and Crockett standards. So,
okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's I haven't researched it too much. We had one that would have been a net booner that a friend landowner killed, and it was ineligible to be entered. That's the only reason I know that. I think we could have entered it in like the same way you could enter a pickup or a found deer or something, but we didn't research it beyond that. But Yeah, the two places that I've learned firsthand that it's ineligible is party hunting, and the other one, I had a friend shoot a set of locked together bucks. One was alive, one was dead. The alive one would have easily been a net booner. I think it was over 200 inches,
Wow.
and that is ineligible with Boone and Crockett due to their fair chase standards.
Hmm.
So I thought that was unique.
That is, I didn't know that. That's really unique. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's man. Yeah, that's interesting. Huh?
yeah,
What do, what do you what, and so what do you think? Like 200, right? 200 inches. That's what everyone just throws around now, right? Like
right.
that's how, in your opinion, how rare is a 200-inch whitetail? Like by the numbers, because you
Today, in today's standards and in or old time standards, and I can give you a very good I could give you a very good timeline analogy that sort of
I would
you
love that. Yeah,
know,
yeah,
proves my point. I'm going to go back to what I would consider the heyday of Iowa when things were the best of the best, and I'm going to use the year 2007. And I just remember this, and I still have, this is before digital trail cameras, so we literally printed them off to keep a record of it. But in 2007 is the year that I shot the one that was scored 214. I was hunting 5 bucks that bigger of that caliber. Some wouldn't have. Yeah, that's what's amazing. 5 bucks. I ran a quarter the number of cameras that we're running now.
uh huh,
You know what I mean? So that just shows the math of, you know, instead of running myself 100 plus cameras, I was running 20, 25,
hmm,
and had 5 bucks of that caliber. And they wouldn't have all been 200, but they'd all been over 190 for
yeah,
sure. And, ended up killing that one. But I didn't hunt that one like every day, like it was the end all be all. I would bounce around. I'd hunt some of the other ones. I just happened to get that one. And, as per today, I didn't have one deer that was over 200 inches last year on camera,
yeah. Four times the amount of cameras,
Right.
and zero.
Exactly. So you know, that just shows, and from hanging around with me, like we're not in one farm. I'm not talking one farm. I'm talking 5 counties,
Big radius. Yeah.
corner to corner. I bet we're spread out 80 miles apart. So
Yeah.
that's, we cast a pretty wide net to what we're looking for. So
Why do you think that in 2007, just throwing that date out to 2023, what do you think happened to the Iowa herd from then to 2023? And I'm guessing EHD is one of the things that, I mean, you tell me, what do you think changed?
well, I think the math of it doesn't make sense. And in meaning that, I'll go back one year earlier. When I went with Skip and spoke at the state capitol,
Mhm.
I did some research on, historic harvest levels and stuff. And in the year that struck me was in the 2005 into early 2006, what I would call the 2005 deer season. Iowa hunters harvested 213,000 deer. That was our total harvest that was registered. The 2023 season, it was 103,000. So it's 100,000 less deer.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, that alone shows that number one, in a lot of parts of Iowa, there are way less deer than there used to be, like way, way less. And, I think that's one of the root causes of the less mature deer, because I think part of that's EHD, part of it, and I don't care which branch of it you point the finger at, technology is part of the issue, and I'm not saying specifically cameras. It's everything from, we can basically use rifles here now to, there's been a ton of changes in the last roughly 15 years that have benefited harvesting deer, not preserving deer.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. What about like some of the areas that we drove around, like the deer density is really, really high. Do you think that plays in, like, because obviously some parts of the state it seems like population's really low, and then some of them just has really high deer density. Back in the day, were those also just super high deer density areas as
they
well?
were.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's
That's one thing that really, I always thought that's what was changing, and that's what made it worse, was the high deer density. But we went through periods where we really tried to manage does, sort of because through leasing or owning, we have a ton of land, and as to be to kind of be a good steward and really a good neighbor to our, neighbors that farm and that do all that sort of thing. I didn't want it to be where our farm was the one that everybody pointed the finger at and considered a hotspot. I mean, we've had nights where in one night we've shot over 30 does,
Mhm.
on one farm, and I didn't see that change. You know what I mean? I didn't see our sort of reduction in that make any changes that way. And so back then we shot more deer, more does, antlerless deer back then than we have in the last 5 years here. So I don't know that that's the overwhelming part of it. What I have seen happen is during these EHD years, very few people have the fortitude to realize what's happening, and say, hey, I can't shoot one of these nice bucks this year because we're just down this much. Unfortunately, what I see happening is, so let's say in a good year, you've got 3 or 4 that are in the 170 to 190 range, and you've got a whole bunch of 160, 150, 3 and 4 year old nice ones. Well, EHD takes a bunch out. People just reset to hunt the best that they have left.
So they're going after a 150 or a 160.
Yes. And then the other thing you got to remember is here we have the ability to harvest up to $3 a piece. That's without party hunting. And then if you were involved in that, the opportunity for more. So there is the opportunity to over harvest, and they don't, because EHD is so erratic, it can only affect part of a county. You might have the northern half of a county hit hard, the southern half not at all. And, stuff like that there's no way that the DNR can really intervene at the last minute and change the quotas or reduce that, because you'd literally have people saying, hey, we have too many deer, 10 miles from people that say, hey, we have none. So
Yeah, that's a really good point and really challenging. And imagine they had a retrospect reduce tags after someone drew, waited 7 years to get their tag, and like, well, actually, we have to reduce the tags by 20%, and you're one of the unlucky people. Like, I see what you're saying. Like, if there was an outbreak in September and
right.
everyone bought their tags already, and they're like, well, we actually need to dial this back, it'd
Yes.
be impossible.
Yep. And thankfully for the non-residents, and I'm quizzed on this all the time. People blame the non-residents for things. And thankfully, the non-resident tags, like the amount of deer harvested last year by non-residents, were less than 3% of our total harvest.
Wow.
Yeah. So luckily for the non-residents, they aren't part of the problem or part of the solution. They are that's just its own thing. Like, we don't expect non-residents to manage our deer herd because we don't give enough tags for them to do that.
Mhm.
And we also don't give enough tags that I feel on a statewide level they can really do any harm.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because there's just too few of them and they're just too infrequent. So the good or bad, the deer herd is being managed by the Iowa residents.
Mhm.
So
I'm going to give you a magic wand, and you can put whatever rule in Iowa to get it back to 2007, or maybe 2 rules. What are you doing?
no, that's a great question. I would probably take the first thing I would do. I would go right back to the 2007 um, regulations as far as our weapons.
Mhm.
I would do away with straight wall cartridges. Um, yeah, I would probably take it one step further. I would probably remove scopes from muzzleloaders.
Ah,
If you could go back to, just shotguns and slugs or muzzleloaders, that was almost prior smokeless muzzleloaders back in that day. So if I could just say, go back to the weapons used then, I think that would help a lot. So
yeah.
the average Iowa hunter is far more effective nowadays than they've ever been due
Yeah.
to all kinds of technology.
Yeah, straight wall cartridge rifles, smokeless muzzleloaders, which are
I
they
mean,
can shoot forever.
yep.
You know?
And a lot of people complain and see a huge flaw in Iowa management due to the party hunting. When it was done back in the day, I think that's why Iowa had the giant bucks that it did. Because at that time it was a pretty ineffective way of targeting a certain age class of deer. So if a shotgun group of 20 guys rolled through a woodlot, you'd hear a million shots.
Hmm.
You'd hear a million shots, but not, and they may get 4 or 5 deer. But if they did shoot some bucks, they shot a 3-year-old good genetic buck. They shot a 5-year-old bad genetic buck. They shot a spike, whatever. They didn't focus on, 3-year-old 10-pointers and up,
Hmm.
which is what people hunting out of stands tend to do. And they also kept the deer numbers in check. But I also think that they're sort of not, they're sort of shooting cull bucks inadvertently and shooting, straight across all parts of the deer herd really helped.
Hmm.
That part of it, even though it's somewhat of a barbaric way to hunt, and with a shotgun without a scope or sights, I'm sure there's tons of deer wounded, and that's an unfortunate consequence. But I think it did manage our deer herd very well for 30 plus years, and that it is that style of hunting that created what most people think of Iowa.
Hmm. How is there still quite a bit of people doing deer drives, or is it basically non-existent now?
Oh no, it's not non-existent. They just, as an area gets sort of settled as a neighborhood, so to speak, where I
Yeah.
buy, like say I have a 600-acre farm and you buy next to me with 200 acres, and then pretty soon the land is fragmented. And for them to drive hunt effectively, they need big blocks of land. So the fragmentation of the ownership has changed. So you typically,
They can't go from one road to the other like they used
yes, yep. Now I have a good friend and my neighbor up here where I'm sitting right now, and he is still part of one of the bigger. He's the head honcho of one of the bigger drive groups around,
to. Hmm.
and they'll kill opening weekend in first shotgun. They'll kill 50 something deer. There might be on a busy drive. There might be 20 guys. There's probably 10 to 12 core guys that are the main ones, and they hunt farmer farms. And literally, like some of the farms they hunt, he'll tell me, he's like, if we don't shoot everything that runs out, we don't get to come back. He's like,
Mm.
these guys, these are farmers. And what's surprising is they do that every year on the same farms, and they every year will still kill 160s to 180s,
Hmm.
you know. And what's surprising, I would call zero management or negative management. And they still that
Above
those
average
farms,
results. Yeah.
yeah, they still get them. It's interesting. But getting back to the technology side of that, this group 10 years ago would have all been shotguns and slugs, some of which might have iron sights, some of which might just be like a gun you take pheasant hunting. Nowadays, they all use AR platformed 350 Legends with reverse slings where the guns hang on their chest. I mean, there's no more, oh, the buck ran by and it was my
It's a
gun was
tactical
leaning
team.
against a tree.
Seal,
Yeah, I mean,
SEAL Team 6 going through there.
yes, exactly. And they can throw, something's running, they can throw 10 shots at it quick.
Hmm.
That's another place where technology has just benefited even that style of hunting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, anything else on Iowa? I want to talk about land. I want to talk about projects that you're doing, projects
Yeah.
you've done. Um,
Well,
so it, go ahead.
um, one thing we didn't hit on the draw side of things
Hmm.
that is important for people to realize, Iowa is a preference point system, not a bonus point system. So that means someone with 5 points can't draw before everyone with 6 points draws. So
Okay. Yep.
people think of it as a lottery, and it can get, if you get down to that, like if they draw everybody with 6 points and then there's only half the tags for the people with 5 points, at that point it becomes sort of a lottery, because if there's 100 people in the pool with 5 points and only 50 tags, somehow some get chosen over the others. But we are not, like, you're not going to put in and draw an archery tag with 2 points when somebody has 5 points.
That's a good point.
That will never happen. It's not a true lottery. If we had a bonus point system, a bonus point simply acts like more names in a hat.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That's
Yep.
not what we have. We draw from pools of applicants. Everybody with 7, everybody with 6, everybody with 5, and then it runs out. So
Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
yeah.
It makes sense though. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Well, it's the end of April. May's right around the corner. You're talking about you're like in farmer mode right now. We're getting,
Yeah.
getting ready to be in farmer mode. What are some whitetail projects that maybe someone just picked up a new piece, or maybe they have a lease, or maybe they have grandma's farm down the road. What are some things they can be doing in the month of May to prepare for this upcoming season?
Um, that time of year, most people won't historically think of doing that. But if you have the ability to, once those trees have leafed out completely, like most people try to do their in timber like bedding spots, like hinge cutting and stuff. We'll reserve the actual true bedding areas, like literally where we want them to bed specifically. If it's real wide open timber, we'll cut that in May. And the reason being, when those trees are leafed out already, they're going to provide that much more cover on the ground instantly.
Hmm.
So that, it's definitely not too late to do some small hinge cutting, some bedding area plots like that. Other than that, on the true whitetail stuff, I mean, we'd be done with burning by then. We're primarily just planning all our we'll be planning all our, what I would call summer plots. They may, if they make it, if they're beans and stuff, they'll go right on through. But
Hmm.
it's definitely not too late to plant, native grasses either. I think a lot of people plant on the early side and they don't manage what's there. The vegetation, if there's brome grass there, they need to get that killed first. I'd rather have all the weeds and grasses up out of the ground, do my final spraying, and even if I have to plant into May. The other thing someone could do, and again, this depends if it's a permission farm or if it's a owned or managed property. I'd say early to mid May is probably the prime time to plant miscanthus. We've got
Okay.
I've got a bag of 5,000 I think coming here. Should be here by the end of the week. So
Do you use a tree planter for that when
yeah,
you
I've
plant
done it
those?
both ways. We've done it. We did some of it if it gets too muddy by hand, but the best results we have, and by far the fastest, is a small tractor pulled tree planter. That works the
Hmm.
best. And then just managing it, managing the vegetation and using pre-emergence and stuff beyond that. So
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's like almost like just the whitetail calendar is so sporadic to where it's
it
like
is.
you have to get this stuff done in this 3 week period, and then you have to get this stuff done in this 3 week
Yep.
period, and it's
Yep.
easy to you can't really get ahead on some of that stuff like you're talking about, like people jumping the gun on planning things too early because they're excited and not doing the pre-management well enough. What's a hard lesson you learned when it came to whitetail projects where if someone calls you like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this," and you're like, "No, no, 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 don't do that. I've done that and it does not work."
Well, the I've got two, and I've got one which is a very current mistake that I just made that I'm still not 100% sure of the outcome of what we're going to do. So that one's unique. But the biggest mistake I see is what you said with people jumping the gun. They're so excited. I don't care what it is, whether it's prairie grass, planting clover, planting trees. They're so excited for the planting, they don't do the prep and getting it killed. Getting whatever the vegetation that's already established there completely killed, even if it means skipping a year, doing a fall spraying to get that sod killed good. So you're going into a clean seed bed. I'd say 90% of the prairie grass, specifically prairie grass failures that I see are due to lack of proper site prep. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Do you think it's possible for someone right now, April 25th, to have a prayer? But right now it's brome. Is there any way that you think that they could still plant it this year, like spray it twice and then drill it in, or do you think that's not wise? Because native grass it's expensive seed.
It's expensive seed. If, without knowing the site conditions, we actually got tasked with that exact problem last year. And what happened was a small area had gotten missed in the fall spraying, and it was a CP42 CRP project, expensive seed. FSA wasn't going to allow it to be planted, and this was a big project, and this little area wasn't 3 or 4 acres. And I came up with a solution, and when I did, their jaw dropped. You know what I mean? Because they didn't know what to say. They eventually let us do it. But what we did, and this goes totally against the way you kill sod in the spring is with a moldboard plow.
Okay. Yep.
We literally plowed it, like, yeah, literally flipped it over, made it dirt, disked it back down to dirt, planted it, and it came out beautiful. But that wasn't in their playbook of normal techniques to plant prairie grass. But in this instance, it provided an instant termination of whatever crop was there. So, which was just brome grass. And in that case, it's doing better than the part that we no-tilled, had sprayed in the fall and everything else. So that's just
Interesting.
something to think about. So,
Yeah.
and the way I picked up on that is I've had people or seen projects where people are hardcore, like organic, that are not going to spray, and that leaves them no other choice but to use mechanical means to terminate whatever's there. So
Hmm. Do you think it's probably not feasible to spray like spray today, for example, and then spray in 2 weeks and then drill it in like the third week of May or last week of May?
if it was just prairie grass, like, or say just switchgrass, I
Hmm.
think you could do it because you do have enough chemical choices out there. If you sprayed it, mowed it short, let it green a little, sprayed it, waited 2 or 3 more weeks, hopefully get another little flush of grass and weeds, sprayed it again, but on that spraying, used a full rate, whatever's legal in your counties, of atrazine, or if
Hmm.
you can't get that, use simazine or something. I've seen that push through, and then you'd have to be really diligent and probably come back behind it with quinclorac,
Hmm.
which is something that will kill grass in established grasses. So you'd have your work cut out for you, but that would be like a rescue type planning, I would call it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's far harder than just doing it where you get a fall kill of everything and then go in and plant. So.
Hmm.
Now,
Okay.
cropland, if it had been cropped in the past, I wouldn't hesitate at all.
Hmm.
It's usually the brome or pasture type grass that we struggle with, the brome and fescue,
Hmm.
or orchard grass. Orchard, reeds, canary, those are all ones that are pretty tenacious.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any other projects that you've done over the years that were just complete failures? And
Well,
you, I mean, there's a bunch, I'm sure, but
well, this is one that the verdict is out on, and this is the one where I said I might have just made a pretty big error. And about 2 weeks ago, it was a farm you and I went to. We drove by it. We didn't have any cameras out there. It was a brand new project for us, and had a big, beautiful pond on it. And the landowner was like, "Hey, we should plant some thermal cover here." So he put this whole tree plan together, and I said, "I'll help you do it." So we sprayed it last fall, burned it, sprayed our strips, burned the whole area, um, and then went back, planted 500 white pines and white spruce, and tubed them all. Tubed it. I mean, it looks like Arlington Cemetery. It's beautiful. So I put a post to doing it on my Instagram,
uh-huh.
and somebody hit me right back, and they said, "I don't think you can tube conifers.
Hmm.
They're going to die." And I'm like, we didn't think of that. We just spent a day and a half putting
Tubing.
tubes on 500 trees. And so I called, my fiance has a forestry degree. My brother has a forestry degree. I asked them, and they didn't know. So I actually reached out to Skip. He wasn't 100% sure. And then I reached out to our state forester, and he said he's seen it go both ways. He's seen the tubes help them. He said it would have been better to cage them,
Sure.
but than it would be to.
500 metal cages.
Well, that's it. Now we're sitting there like, what are we gonna do? So we're gonna keep an eye on it. Yeah. So, like I said, you're never done learning. So, and I
Yeah.
appreciate somebody reaching out to me on Instagram and questioning what we were doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. Because I imagine, yeah, it's probably something you probably can't. Is the goal just to have them tubed for a year or two and then pull them off after they get established, or is it
that
the hope to
was
let them shoot all the way up?
yeah. Well, the problem is, you're co- compared to hardwoods, your conifers are going to grow out as much as they're going to grow up when they're little, and I think that's where you run into the problem.
Hmm.
So in my mind, we're going to have to replace the tubes with cages at some point. So this is a pretty remote farm, so I kind of want to let it go a little while and just see, hey, do we have enough moisture? Is this tree planting going to be a success? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And then say, okay, we think we have an 80% survival rate, so go back out there and we'll pull the tubes off and cage the remaining 400 survivors. So,
Hmm.
but
Yeah, that tree plantings are always interesting because
Yeah,
there's
there's
so many
just
things that can go against you, and there seems like there's less that can go for you.
it really is. It's, when we help a new landowner, somebody that's bought a farm through us, and we're laying out the plan, and we do the kind of the consulting, if you will, and the projects normally. So
Hmm.
we're involved in both sides of it. But if we do that, I explain to people, for the time and the money, we got to do it. That's a micro tree planting, in my mind, is a micro project. We got to take care of all the macro projects, because 9 out of 10 times you're going to get less return on a tree planting, less bang for your buck on the habitat net than you will on almost any other project.
Hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, so meaning like TSI,
Yeah.
invasive species
Yep.
removal, putting in food plots,
Yep.
improving access, all those
Yeah.
different things.
Yep.
Yep.
Those things are all going to help the farm far greater sooner than a tree planting,
Yeah.
and that's why, like in this instance, this landowner, he wanted to do 5,000 trees. I'm like, no way. If you do, get some new friends, because and then he saw how much it costs
Yeah.
and to do it correctly. And so he's like, okay. And I said, we just, on a farm like this, if we do 500 a year, eventually we'll have a nice stand.
Yep.
If we do 5,000 one year and we get a drought like last summer, we'll have zero, literally zero.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing it again. I said, I'd rather keep adding to what we got than going all in one year. So,
Yeah. I'll tell you what I did last year I planted cedars in white pine, and I didn't want a cage. I think I planted 300 or 400 of them, and I just put up there's an existing fence line, and then I fenced in like a 4.5, 5 foot fence with T-posts all the way around it.
oh, wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, because it was, let's say 40 yards wide and 120 yards long. So I just fenced all that in, hoping that that would relieve browse pressure.
Sure.
They did good for a long time. Then I went out there after deer season. Every one of the tops,
Yep.
it didn't work.
Yep.
It kept them out of it for a while, but then a herd of 15 does one
Yep.
night can cause all that damage. And so
I
I
did.
would recommend that.
This is a unique one too. We do a lot of equip contract projects, and one thing we've started to do is we do right up against the drip line of the trees. We'll plant a few rows of shrubs,
Mm,
and then we drop all the trees on top of them,
yep.
trying to provide sort of a natural barrier for the deer. And I sat during gun season last year. I was sitting at my place in a shooting house. Really, there was no deer specifically I was after. It was more just observation. And there was one doe that never came to the food plot, but was working through those cut treetops just to get to those shrubs that we planted. So
Wow.
it's like you almost can't win.
Yeah.
It's crazy between the droughts and everything else. I think if I did another big tree planting, I it, and I would do it more in blocks than in rows. I think I would electric fence it. I think
Mm,
cost and time. I think I could manage an electric fence probably better than anything else, and it would also not make. We wouldn't have the problem of the tubes, the trees growing into the tubes and the cost of the tubes and everything else.
yeah.
So
That's a really good piece of advice. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I'm planting 2,800 trees this year. I have 1,500 left, and I'm tubing half of them. I tubed 100% of my trees last year, not the conifers, but tubed 100% of them last year. And it takes a long time. It takes a long
it
time to
does.
plant them, and then it takes a long time to tube them all. So I did
Yep.
half. But electric fence would make a lot of sense if you can just even if you did a unit of them where you
Right.
for sure wanted them to grow, and if
Yep.
the other ones get browsed.
Yep.
Um, this is a debate I've been having mentally, and even with some people here. It's there's a lot of people that honeysuckle specifically to where they say it's great cover. The deer, do eat it, and I put that in air quotes there. But I planted shrubs last weekend, and then I haven't put tubes on them, and I have some young honeysuckle. All the shrubs I planted, and even the young trees, already are getting nipped like crazy, but they haven't touched any honeysuckle. And it's like if it was so good, there wouldn't be the crazy regeneration of honeysuckle if the deer actually browse it. Because I've planted, I think I'm up to 4,800 trees and shrubs I planted at my
Right.
house. And if they're not tubed, they're gone, or they're still the same exact size of when I planted one 3 years ago.
Right. I would say if your deer, I've seen very little to almost no utilization of honeysuckle from a browse standpoint. I would think if you were in an area and you had a property where they were utilizing honeysuckle, it's a really bad property. Like there's
It's a good
garbage.
way to
You know
put
what I
it.
mean? Like Like that's one step above eating the rocks and sticks. That's
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my thing. My big farm in Appanoose County has tons of honeysuckle. It's actually kind of a negative. It's one of the real negatives. You and I, that one day with Richard, we
Hmm.
walked a piece that I was marking some white oaks to cut.
Yeah.
And that piece, before we did any cutting, and we still haven't, we didn't have cost share money. We just did it. We cut and sprayed all the honeysuckle that we could find. And it's crazy this spring how many more there are. And just to get back to your point, there is almost no natural white oak regeneration and
Mhm.
that honeysuckle because of deer browse. And we have crazy amounts of honeysuckle invading that forest. So yeah, I would say that. On the other hand, if your farm has no other cover, if you don't have much cover, I would go slowly on removing the honeysuckle because it is good. You know what I mean? It does provide cover at the right height for deer. There's
Mhm.
no doubt about that. So
Yeah, it's definitely a debate. And there was a couple of years ago, it was when we had a really bad winter, which has been a while, obviously. And this was mainly a CRP farm with no food on it. And there was cedars along a fence line, and you get to see the browse line on the cedars. And I'm like, those poor deer.
yeah, they're really hurting if they're eating cedars. I
Yeah.
mean, eastern red cedars. When you go north, I'd say the Minneapolis area north, they love white cedar. If you
Mhm.
have true northern white cedar, that those lakes up there all have major browse lines, and it's pretty interesting from that standpoint. But yeah, it's very rare that they eat those eastern red cedars, but they will if they have to.
Mhm. Let's rank some projects. So I'm gonna rattle off five as many whitetail projects as I can think of in my top of my head, and rank them in terms of priority. So we're
Sure.
gonna we're gonna do uh, TSI, tree planting, food plots, screening, and we'll do those four. We're and then a fruit tree planting because people love planting fruit trees. So we have fruit trees, traditional tree shrub planting, TSI, screening, and I don't remember what the fifth one was. So I
Food
don't expect you.
plots, or
Food plots, yes, yep,
yeah.
food plots. How would you rank? You have 1 year. Which ones are you knocking out because you can't do all of them 1 year?
I would probably put the TSI at the top of my list. The TSI would be the very top of my list. Um, and again, each property is going to have specific challenges, but so I'm speaking pretty generally. But I would put TSI at the top of the list, followed probably second by food plots because you've got to have some food. Third, it would be a toss up based on screening. If the farm really needed screening, meaning like from the road screening, then I would place that there. If it was more just screening for access, you know, I
Mhm.
would I'd still probably say that would be my number four choice or number three choice. Three or four would be screening and tree planting, depending on what. That would be a very farm specific
Mhm.
one. My last choice would be fruit tree planting. That would be, and I've done a lot of it, and I've not been super successful at it. And I've been like, through our real estate business and everything else, I'm literally on farms every single day. And
Mhm.
I'd say if you get in South Central Iowa and it's a farm that has been a hunting farm for a while, chances are it has what I call an apple tree graveyard. And what they consist of is, some kind of mesh, some kind of cages, this nice little planting, and all dead trees.
Mhm.
Like they are an immense amount of work to keep going, and that's the negative side. Now if it happens to be where it borders your home farm and you have the ability to do the wintertime dormant spraying, and do the pruning and keep the cages up, and then still accept you're going to lose a fairly high percentage through just droughts and bugs. And we have with cedar apple rust is another challenge for our fruit trees. Those are all things that make it that. The other thing I would say, I have never seen or directly talked to somebody that I know that said, "Oh man, that big buck that I've been after, he finally came into the apple trees and I shot him." I've never seen that happen, never.
Yeah.
So if that's, so if you're prioritizing, if you have a farm that everything else is keyed up and you really like that, or it's close to your house and you want to plant some fruit trees, that'd be great. But that should be probably the very last thing. Like,
Mhm.
to me, and again, it's what everybody likes. Typically, though, fruit trees don't do well in this part of Iowa. I know when I go to, like Wisconsin or go back east, you find old farmsteads,
Yep.
and they've overgrown, abandoned, and there's apple trees everywhere. Like that is very rare in Iowa. So,
Mhm.
and in this part of Iowa, and I don't know why that is. Like
Yeah.
there's just some challenges with the soils or droughts or whatever that take them out. So,
I can't remember where I read this or heard this. I want to say in some parts of the country, it was required if you homesteaded, you had to plant X amount of apple trees.
oh, that's cool.
And so I
That
think
would
that's
be,
like in Pennsylvania or some of the other states
yeah,
where you
yep,
find them randomly. It is those old homesteads like you mentioned.
yep.
Yeah, so maybe that wasn't a rule in Iowa
No, it
in the
definitely wasn't.
1800s.
If they had a rule, if they made a rule in Iowa, it's to cut trees down and get rid of them. The
Plant
average
much more.
Iowa mindset is not tree friendly. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Circling back to the deer population dropping, do you think that has to do with just hedge lines getting removed and like all the reduction of just actual habitat?
I don't, I and again, I'm speaking specifically to probably 5 counties in South Central Iowa because I'm here all the time. If I'm in another county, if I'm any further west or very far north and east, very different, parameters. But down here, we have a neat feature where I can go on our Iowa GIS mapping software, and I do that when we get a new farm to see what it looked like years ago. Most of the time, if I go back to the 1930s to 1950s, it was more open then than now.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah. That's a
greatly
good
more,
point. That's a good
greatly
point.
more open. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's that. I think if I was just going to go through the timeline of things that happened, you go back to 2005. We had a super high deer population. They came in. They opened the rifle season. They allowed us to have a late rifle season in January. That you know, so that started the population trending downward,
Hmm.
and which is what they wanted. They knew we were way too high for somewhat for carrying capacity of good habitat, but definitely socially for getting along with people driving and farmers. We had too many. They were going to do something, so
Hmm.
they did that. So we were doing good, and the population was probably trending down at a normal level. And then 2012 hit with EHD, and it just took another third of the herd out right there. And
Hmm.
then we got another little bout of it in 13, and it took them 2 more years to actually remove that rifle season. So I think that was the downward trend, and then everything started to trend back how it should. But then we got hit in 19 again. So it's
Hmm.
like we just can't seem to get out of this chain of every 3 to 5 year major EHD outbreak in some part of the best deer hunting in Iowa.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, but here's another thing that's really kind of interesting. Where I've killed a couple of my biggest bucks. My friend still owns that farm, and then he has a neighbor that owns another 2,000. The neighbor owns 2,000 acres there, and is really struggling to get on big deer. And I know my friend. I still help my friend manage his 800 acres, and they're really struggling. So the neighbor called Bill Winkie to do some consulting for him. So Bill came down, was working on the farm. Bill called me and he said, "What is going on there?" You know, and I said, "I don't know, but it's terrible." I'm
Hmm.
like, "It is nothing like it used to be." And that was like I was talking about it back in the day where I had 5 over 200. Two of them were there. I killed one of them, and
Hmm.
then turned around a couple years later, killed 198. I mean, it was as good as land got in Iowa.
Hmm.
Now it's bigger, well managed, no more cattle pasture. It's no, they've reduced to drive hunting, and this is Bill and I both gave the landowners some different recommendations, and at one point, our advice was radically different. Over the last 5 years, between my friend and the 2,000 acre guy, we figured it out through depredation tags. We collectively, meaning both parties, both landowners, have killed about 500 does on that place in 5 years. There's still tons of deer, but the hunting's getting worse. And that's what I put my recommendation was we stop. I know I can't get them to stop all doe hunting
Hmm.
because some of them still believe it has to be done. But what I think the problem is, all of our doe seasons, the easy doe hunts to manage deer are in January. So I think what we've done is we've sort of undone the genetic lottery of how whitetails breeding, dominant bucks breeding those does, because we're shooting the does with fawns.
Mm-hmm.
You're shooting bred does in January. And I just think that we've done that enough that we've literally got that problem, and not shooting enough cull bucks has got the whole thing out of whack. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, that was my advice. I said, guys, we've shot 500 does and it's getting worse. Why would we keep doing that? Like,
Yeah.
let's go another direction. Like,
Yeah.
so
That's something I always wondered too, because I mean, there's a lot of people that preach shooting does, and it's like it feels like we're playing God sometimes.
exactly.
And I
Yeah,
don't know if that's a good thing, because when
right.
we didn't do all these things, I mean, clearly, like what you're saying, it was better. And then once we try to interfere way more, it gets worse. It's like sometimes, that's
Yep.
something that has crossed my mind quite often, because there is this debate where it's like if you're not shooting does, then you feel like you're being a bad landowner or a bad land
Right.
steward,
Right.
and then it just gets worse. And so it's like,
Yeah, and
well,
like what I took away, or where I left it with those guys, is my recommendation was on that place: shoot as many does as you can until about October 20th.
mm,
You know what I mean? And
mhm,
that goes against what a lot of people think, because, oh, I'm going to spook my spots, blah blah blah. And it depends on what your priority is. I mean, these guys have big enough farms; you can allocate a few areas to shoot does that have no bearing on the rest of the, roughly collectively 3,000 acres.
mhm.
So that was my recommendation: keep on your doe program, but all early. And luckily, like our depredation tags, if we get them, you could shoot them in early muzzleloader, which is mid-October.
Mhm.
You could
Perfect
shoot them
timing.
with a bow. So
Yeah.
during bow season. So there is a way to do it. Everybody just likes waiting for that late rifle season because they feel the hunting's done. They don't mind the pressure and everything else. So, but yeah, that farm there should be a study as to, I mean, because especially the 2,000-acre landowner, there is no project that he won't fund if he thinks
It'll do. Yeah.
it'll do it good. You know what I mean? I
Yes.
mean, it whatever can be done can be done, and it is on 3,000 acres in the best part of Iowa, a place that literally, because I've killed them, produces 200-inch deer. They struggle to get anything over 160 now.
That's so crazy.
It is great.
And to think for that guy that bought that 2,000 acres, acquired it or pieced it together, like he was doing it with the intention of, I know this is one of the best areas in the
Yeah.
entire country. And then if you want to shoot a 160, there's a lot of places in the world where you can do that for a lot
Well,
cheaper.
exactly. I mean, and that's what's really got us kind of thinking about it. And I know, not focusing on harvesting whatever you want to call them, cull bucks, or just older bucks that are never going to be the target that he's after. And I think that needs to be a focus of both landowners as well. Literally, they need to shift some of their energies from taking so many does to trying to take out some of those cull bucks.
Yeah.
If they would do that, I think over the years that would help. That those things would help, because obviously the genetics are there.
Hmm.
And the shocking fact about it is, in my mind, because I know, because I was there, those farms were better when they were cattle pasture. Way better.
Which is taboo to say. That sounds
Yes.
crazy when you say it, but you were there and you
Yes.
know it. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah,
Yeah.
it really is nuts. So I don't, that one there could be an interesting study case, and we would have had to have some more metrics in place,
Hmm.
early, to really be able to, to see what's there.
Illustrate and compare, but yeah, but I mean, enough. Yeah, that's so fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, it is. And unfortunately, that I would say that's because of my early successes there, that farm is a glaring example. But I think overall it is trending harder to grow true big deer in Iowa, you
Mhm.
know, than it used to be. And it's a little bit misleading, because the other thing now, you have very well, um, public figures that are very entrenched, the Lee Lakowskis and stuff, that do such an awesome job at managing on such a big scale. And people see their results and assume all of Iowa is like that. And it's not. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's probably the biggest, difference that I see is what people, the perception of Iowa versus the reality of Iowa.
Mhm. Let me ask you this: would you? This is a hypothetical that most people probably can't really compare to, but would you rather have one 2,000 acre track or 10 200s or 20 100-acre tracts?
The way things are trending nowadays. Now, before I answer, I have to ask, what's my goal? Is my goal to hunt true big high end deer?
You'll say, yeah, you want to kill Boone and Crockett animals.
The biggest farm I could have,
Okay.
without a doubt. And this is the problem, those smaller farms, those deer have to come from somewhere. Everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to buy this 40 acres or 80 acres in this neighborhood and another 80 in that neighborhood. Well, there's other people doing the same thing. And if they're all not on the exact same plan,
they're all trying to take the high end deers.
Yes. And those are the ones that I see failing the most now is that because, it's hard, especially it's hard to justify even an 80 acres. And 80 acres is a sizable investment.
$500,000 at least.
Yeah. And you go there and to think, okay, I just spent $500,000. I don't have one deer that I technically should shoot, or I got to shoot this 120-inch 8-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's what's so hard. If you'd asked me that question 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, for sure, I would say the more small parcels where you could provide quality habitat, quality food, and capitalize on that. Nowadays, and I mean, some of the main players in Iowa, and the guys that truly kill the big deer every year. What's their system? Big chunks of land.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're right. And it's interesting how that has even flipped in a decade to what you're saying, like
Yes.
how much the whitetail landscape has changed. And that's where sometimes I ask myself, like, how much more new revelations can really come with whitetail hunting? But to me, that you just illustrated there that things change and faster than probably what we realized. 10 years ago is pretty fast, or 5
Right.
years.
But the problem is the one reason that the perception of Iowa and the reality of Iowa are different is because, just using yourself as an example, you interact with way more hunters than most people, but you won't, if you keep living where you live, you won't draw a tag again for 5 years or more.
Yeah.
So you have the vision of what happened today in Iowa and possibly what happened 5 years before that. And then, when you come 10 years from now, it could be, you come next time, it's 10 years from your first hunt. It could be a radically different place.
Yeah.
I mean, radically different. And I see that same thing hunting out west. Guys are putting in 20 years for an elk unit. By the time they draw the tag, it's nowhere near as good as when they first started putting in. So,
yeah. Even when we were driving, I was like, well, I hope the next time I'm here,
I remember you saying
Iowa is equal or better, and I hope it's not worse. And it's something that has to cross your mind, or at least cross my mind.
No, it crosses my mind for sure. And I was fortunate enough last year to pass up some really nice bucks, like not giants, but mid 160s. I don't think any of them would have squeaked 170, but I think I passed 4 up like that. And so I'm hopeful that I might have one to hunt in the future. But I didn't used to have to do that. We used to just find them and hunt them, and that was it. And that's way easier than having to try to grow them or manage to produce them.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Well, is there anything else that you can think of here? I mean, that really fun conversation and very thought provoking. And I think everyone outside of Iowa just like kind of like taps on the glass and wants to look like window shop. What's going on there? Just because it is kind of whether it's right or wrong, or it's like Iowa's just kind of on a pedestal in terms of management. And obviously, there's flaws in every state, right? And some states have a lot more flaws than other ones.
Yeah, we're still the best game in town. I know that.
Yeah. But anything else you can think of here, Steve?
No, that's pretty much it. So.
Awesome. Where can people hunt you down if they want to? I mean, we've done quite a few podcasts here, so I encourage everyone to go back and look at some of those. We had one, I think we recorded at your office there. That might have been 2 or 3 years ago now, and we had this past summer we recorded some. So I encourage everyone to go check those out. But where can people find you?
Probably the best place is just on Instagram. It's just Steve Hanson the third, and we usually keep track of what we're doing on there. Post a lot of stuff, and keep people involved. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate what you do, and I'm going through my checklist of what I need to get done. I admittedly I have 10 apple trees coming in that should be delivered here today or tomorrow, but I plan to my house like a man.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just, every area is different and each person's experience is different. So
yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve.